Good evening and welcome to what will be the 5th round of the 1950s Grand Prix series here at Sim Racing Online. Join us here for 60 minutes of racing around this French circuit at Rouen Les Arts, a very famous circuit from back in the 60s. It feels like we're going through the countryside, but so we've got 1950s cars going around a 1960s circuit. Seems pretty fitting. So we've had a number of rounds so far, some very challenging rounds so far. So if we have a look at our schedule. So we've been to round 1 was at the huge circuit of Pescara, so that was at the Spanish circuit. 25 kilometers long, so that was a very big challenge for our drivers. Then we headed to round 2, which was at the Saxon Ring, the 1960s version of the Saxon Ring, so it's slightly longer than modern day. And then our third round was heading over to Northern Ireland at Dundrod. Country roads, country lanes. And then our 5th round saw a little bit of controversy on the beaches of Italy in the Napoli circuit, street circuit. I'll come to that in a second though. And we're here for our 5th round at Rouen Les Arts. So a circuit that's been around since the 1950s. In fact, 30th of July 1950. And it has held Formula 1 Grand Prix, Formula 2, French F3, Formula French touring cars. We are using I believe it's the layout 1955 to 1971, so that's the layout we're using tonight. So let's have a look at the cars we will be using tonight. So first of all, we have the Aston Martin DBR4. The DBR4 has not been very popular with the drivers. We haven't seen anyone pick the DBR4 as yet, and we probably won't, which is a bit of a pity because it's a nice sounding vehicle and very cool as well. Connaught, the Connaught Type B, again not very popular with our drivers. We did see one driver taking it in one of our races this season, but it has since disappeared off the grid. Then we have on the opposite end of the spectrum, the most popular car this season has been the Cooper Type T43. There's many drivers that have taken this, just maybe because of its lightweight and maybe its nimbleness. Maybe it appeals to the drivers, but the lovely sounding Ferrari 246. Got a couple of these in the field, and you can normally notice when this is going around because of the lovely sound it makes. Looks like sitting in an armchair in the cockpit there. Then we have our unique looking Lancia D50 with what I believe to either be aerodynamics or perhaps fuel tanks at the side. So it's very reminiscent of a kind of a hybrid of an open wheel and sports car. Then we have a very unique looking Lotus Type 16. So the drive position all the way at the back of the car there. So Colin Chapman special, always doing something a little bit different. And then we have our last car on the grid, which is the Maserati 250F. Again, a wonderfully sounding vehicle and very, very powerful, but very, very heavy. There's only a couple of those in the field, but they look a lot like the Ferrari, so I'm about to get confused. So, back to the state of affairs today. So, as I said, we are here for the 5th round. It's supposedly going to be 5 rounds, and then we have our last round next week, but there may be a round added on. But this is how our championship looks so far. So, Maddie Shepherd leads the championship by 22 points. Gert Van Osch in second with 16. Tony Talviti in third with 14. And Julian Paws in fourth with 11. Level on points with Kostas Kanzouras, who won last time out, I believe. And Michael Masaryk, a little bit of a gap down to 6th. Michael Masaryk and Marius Lebioda on 4 points. Then we got Jim Cavallo, Romain Labero on 3, and then John Van der Geest rounding out the top 10. So, without further ado, how about we head to the circuit to see what these drivers are doing on their practice laps. So, we've got a few drivers heading around the track already for their practice laps. So, we're currently watching Maddie Shepherd, currently second in practice, 0.7 of a second down in practice at the moment, using the much favoured Cooper T43. Thankfully, a few of the drivers have been able to make some different skins for these Coopers, because the majority of them are green. So, down the main straight we come, big long straight, one of 2 on this circuit. So, into turn 1, which has no name specifically, is very quick, probably drop down 1 gear. Then we head to this left-hander here, which head towards is this very fast right-hander. Unfortunately, Joe Schlesser lost his life in 1968 on that corner. And then we head to the Virage de Nouveau Monde. This is the cobblestone hairpin there. Accelerate hard up to slight right-hander. And then braking hard down to the Samson turn. And then what I believe is the beautiful corner it's called up here. And then, oh, this is actually the Virage Samson, that very tight corner. This is called Virage de Beauval, which I believe means beautiful turn. Then we go through the Cours de l'Etoile. I don't know the translation of that one. And then a very fast right-hander coming up. I'm not sure if there's going to be a lift or perhaps full throttle around here. It's nearly full throttle in the 1967 car, so I'd imagine in the 1950s it's going to be very, very quick. Then down the long back straight, players will have to avoid that. There's a big drain cover just coming into the braking zone there, so they're going to have to avoid that in the braking zone. So if there's going to be passing manoeuvres down into this bottom turn, drivers are going to have to be very careful that they don't hit that drain cover, because it can unsettle the car quite significantly. So it looks like Gaetan Noyes has popped up into second place on the timesheet. So 2:08.379 is the time to beat. And it looks like Maddie Shepherd has got a little bit closer. So here is current provisional practice leader, Tony Talviti, in one of the other Coopers. So I am using automatic cameras today, so the game is going to choose the action for me. At certain points I'll have a little bit of manual control. So I believe Gaetan Noyes, this is his first time in this series. I'm not seeing him on the championship list, so this is his first time. He's going to join us perhaps for this round and the next. Currently in the Ferrari. Beautiful sounding engine. So lots of fast corners on this track. You don't want to get it all wrong on that first turn though. It needs to be perfectly balanced with perhaps a little bit of rear slip coming through that fast right-hander. And then the slowest corner on the track, it's absolutely sideways. and up the final part of the circuit. So Julian Paws is one of our other drivers in contention of the championship. Another Cooper driver, but this time in a white Cooper with green stripes. So if I look at my cheat sheet, Julian Paws has competed in all 4 rounds with us. He's got 1 pole and 2 podiums. There are no bonus points for this championship. So usually we might have a bonus point for fastest lap or pole position, but no such luck here. Our drivers are going to have to fight for all the points they can get, because we have not got a lot on offer. It is 8 for a win, and then 6, 4, 3, 2. So points paying positions all the way down to 5th, but that doesn't stop the action. We've had some great action all the way through the field. So another Cooper runner, but this time Romain Lebeau is in a red Cooper. Just coming out the back half of the circuit. Big, huge tower there. Get a good sense of scale when you're coming past. You feel really small compared to that tower. And then one of our only Lancia D50 runners is Phil Brown. Now Phil Brown has so far, he's had best finish of 5th place, but that was in the 2nd round, but he's not had much luck from then on. A 13th place, a 10th place and an 11th place. So I remember vividly in round 1, we were focusing on other cars and I saw a blue Lancia cartwheeling in the background. Unfortunately, that was Phil Brown. And then we have Ben Summers, my teammate, again in a Cooper. So if you're familiar with sim racing, this circuit is probably high up on your list of circuits that you've driven, because it's been in multiple games. Started off in 1999 with Grand Prix Legends, where a lot of sim racers, including myself, got introduced to it, and I wouldn't have known it existed. But it was put in the game in kind of replacement, because they couldn't get the license for the Le Mans Bugatti circuit for the 1967 season. So Rouen was their replacement. So another driver in the Ferrari is Michael Masaryk. See if we can find any of the other drivers out on track at the moment. So a little about the circuit. So first opened in 1950. Street circuit. I don't know if you can call it a street circuit, really. Which ran on public roads with a few medium straights, a cobbled hairpin, as we saw at the Nouveau Monde, at the southernmost tip, and a few blind corners through the wooded hillside. So the circuit, as far as I'm aware, it's 6.54 kilometers long. So it's quite a long circuit, so it's an over a 2-minute lap here. So the majority of our drivers are not out on circuit at the moment, apart from Ben Summers getting some last practice laps in. We should be going over to qualifying in due course. So as I said before, it hosted the Formula 1. Unfortunately, it stopped hosting Formula 1 in 1968 with the tragic death of Joe Schlesser. But it hosted Formula 2 events throughout 1970, where in fact the decade of the 1970s, including French F3. And it looks like we are heading to qualification. I see there's a blue Cooper coming out on track. Not sure who the blue Cooper is. Let's look down my list. So Gaten Noyes is one of our drivers coming out. Lovely sounding Ferrari. Kind of iconic for this era, really. That kind of shape of car seemed to be very popular. You notice that the engines of all these cars are mostly up front. That was the way that they did it back then. So the driver sat behind the big huge engine with the fuel tank in the back. Now it's kind of the opposite way around. So I think it is last time out winner is Costas Kanzouris that is out first. Wants to get a clear track ahead of him. So looking at the list, so Costas Kanzouris currently 5th in the championship, or joint 4th if you want to put it like that. He's got an 8th, a 4th, a 9th, and he won last time out. It was unfortunate last time out that a couple of our drivers, I believe actually 3, the top 3 in the championship, suffered errors on the line at Napoli, and the admin is just deciding what to do with whether adding a round onto the end of the championship or perhaps letting the drivers drop around. It would be a shame if we didn't have some kind of solution, because Maddie Shepherd, Tony Talviti and Julian Paws were all knocked out of the race last time through no fault of their own. So let's hope they can make it up in the last few rounds of this series, because it's been great stuff to watch and commentate on. So Tony Talviti currently 3rd in the championship. He's only been 3 rounds this season. So we did actually record him in 15th last time out, but that doesn't tell the whole story. But the other races, he's got a win and a 2nd place, so he's always there or thereabouts. And then we have championship leader Maddie Shepherd, always near the front somewhere. Maddie Shepherd, 2 wins this season with a 2nd place. But those Coopers are proving to be the best balanced, probably the best compromise in speed. They are well matched in speed with some of the what you would suppose are bigger engined cars. So particularly this Ferrari and the Maserati are bigger in capacity, but the Cooper can keep up. So you see the characteristic of the 1950s cars, trying to get that power down, squirming away on these really thin tyres. So our drivers can possibly get 3 laps in here, but they have to have gone out quite quickly. It is only a 10-minute qualification session, and they've only got 6 minutes left, and we haven't even got a lap on the board yet. But I believe Costas Kanzouris is going to be our first driver that's going to cross the line. So currently the fastest. We did see a 2:06 in practice. So a 2:06 in practice. I don't know whether that's going to be improved on at all. There we go, we have some game sound. I didn't have some sound on the board and I didn't notice that, so hopefully the engine sounds will come through. I've been telling you about all the lovely engine sounds and you haven't been able to hear them, so apologies for that. So Tony Dalviti coming down into the bottom. You can hear just ahead of us, that's probably the Lancia D50 of Phil Brown. So Gaten Noyes is a current provisional pole sitter, 209.2. With Julian Paws not behind with a 209.8. What is Tony going to do? Currently 8th. Goes up to provisional pole with a 208.5. So 7/10 ahead of our driver that we're seeing on screen at the moment, Gaten Noyes. So that really fast right-hander now at the back of the circuit. Got to get it balanced. You can run over that little verge there, but you don't want to take too much grass, otherwise it pushes you towards the Armco on the outside. Missing that drain cover, as I said, coming down into one of the final turns on the circuit, one of the slowest turns on the circuit. So currently it's Talviti leading, Noyes second, Paws third, Kanzuris in fourth, Van Osch in fifth. So as Talviti having perhaps a cool down laps. Coming up behind the lovely sounding D50 of Phil Brown. Now just a reminder that our drivers here have to do an out lap. They have to do a fast lap and have to do an in lap. You can't stop out on circuit. If you stop out on circuit and escape back to the pits, that is your qualification done. So Tony Talviti continues around. Libero just popped up to 5th place. Still with some seconds to find. The top 3 are within shouting distance of each other, but there's a little bit of a gap from 4th downwards, so I'm wondering whether there's still some faster gut. We can see in the background, that's Masaryk getting really out of shape. That wasn't Masaryk, that was, I think that was Perotti. That is indeed Perotti, a newcomer to this series as well. So he looked like he had it fully sideways coming out of that fast right-hander and couldn't quite gather it up. So a little bit of a steep learning curve for Maxime Perotti. We've seen him in other series, but yeah, a little too heavy on the front foot there, or the gas. So now provisional pole is down to 0.3, nearly 0.4 of a second. Matty Shepherd has now popped up to provisional pole with a 208.24. Julian Paws, what's Julian Paws got? He's only 4/10 away from provisional pole. It looks like he's a good personal best in the second sector, slightly down in the first one, but coming down the back straight. Brake hard all the way, trying to get as wide as turn as possible. Get your best exit because you're coming up the main straight with a slight lift. But Tony Talviti has noticed that he's probably dropped down to second. What can he do? Personal best in the first sector. But personal best for Matty Shepherd was a 34.6 for the first sector. But Tony Talviti slightly down on that. So it looks like our flag man is waving the flag right in front of the camera, which doesn't help. So Tony Talviti coming out the back of the circuit, going to head on to this main back straight here. So only has about 3.5 tenths to find. This is his last lap because we've got under a minute to go. So I'm not sure that even Tony is going to get another lap in. So that Lancia D50 of Phil Brown is currently in 9th place ahead of him, but he's got 3.8 seconds off provisional pole, so a few drivers finding it tough out there in qualifying. So Tony Talviti comes around the final turn. Don't take too much to curb and don't run too wide either. Trying to get all the speed down the main straight. What kind of lap time have we got? That is provisional pole, so Matty Shepherd can't do anything about it because she is in the pits right at this minute. So taking pole by 1.5 tenths of a second. Julian Paws, is this his final chance to perhaps get back onto the front row? So slightly wide now. So he's following a Ferrari down the straight. I don't know if he's possibly going to get a little bit of a tow. But his personal best possibly in the first sector, but slightly down in the second. He has about 7 tenths or so to find to get onto the front row. Slightly out of shape, but he stays on the tarmac. So is this going to put Julian up onto the front row? So he probably improves his time, but not his position. So Gaten Noyes has just popped up to in front in third for his last lap. So Van Osch just coming down to the last part of the circuit. Slightly wide of the apex there. Brakes slightly late. He's got 1.7 seconds behind the pole sitter. So I'm wondering what he's got. So slight lift coming out the final corner and just head down and just full throttle all the way to the line. So currently 5th place, and he stays in 5th place. He does improve his time, but it looks like we have set the grid for this current time. I can't see any more cars out on circuit at the moment. It looks like we are finished, so I'm going to set the grid. So our drivers, competitive qualifying, top 3 looked like they were maybe head and shoulders above the rest of the field, but very close from then on. So let's see if I can set the grid, and we will be shortly going to 60 minutes of racing around Rouen. So let's look at our starting order. So in the dying minutes, Tony Talviti grabbed pole, not by an awful lot, with Maddie Shepard just behind. So the 2 leaders in the championship are on the front row. Noyes pops up to 3rd with Julian Paws in 4th. Gert Van Osch in 5th with Kostas Kanzaris in 6th. Romain Lebreau in 7th with Michael Masaryk in the first Ferrari in 8th. Phil Brown in that lovely sounding Lancia with Maxime Perotti in 10th. And it looked like Ben Summers did not go out to set a qualifying lap, so he will start on the back of the grid. So possibly waiting for something dramatic to happen in the first few turns. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. The first couple of turns are not too tight, but something dramatic might happen. So, as I said, it is a 60-minute race. We're not expecting any pit stops for fuel or for tyres. Laps just over 2 minutes. It's full throttle all the way to the finish. And we will be having a standing start. So drivers are going to have to watch out for turn 1 because it's slower than you think it is, particularly on cold tyres. But if we're going to treat this as a penultimate round, we only have one more round to go, which will be heading to Zandvoort in the Netherlands. So on the beaches of the Netherlands. Zandvoort, the 1960s version of that. So it's probably a favourite of drivers that like classic cars on historic tracks. I'm looking forward to that myself because it's a track that again was in Grand Prix Legends the game. So instead of trees and barriers like we have here on country lanes, we will be having sand dunes to get lost on. So Be very interesting to see what happens for that round, and that will be on the 9th of April, so next week. So other things coming up at simracingonline.co.uk. Feel free to join us. You can sign up yourself and drive with us. So on Saturday, April the 4th, we have the Street Fight, which is road cars on street tracks with R Factor 2. And then on Sunday, April the 5th, we will be broadcasting a race in the Mon Ultimate with the P2s and the GT3s. I will be in the combox with Rob Milliken for that. And I believe we should be at Sebring for our 7th round. Then on the 7th of April, we have the Porsche Cayman GT4 World Cup in Automobilista 2. That's on Tuesday, the 7th of April. Then we have a new series starting on the 11th of April, which is a Saturday. It's the Porsche 992 Cup. So I believe we're trying to emulate the Porsche 992's original season. It's a great car for R Factor 2. Then we have our first race of the Formula 1 1967 series. Now I will be broadcasting that from the combox. And we've got some classic cars and some classic tracks. So we're going to be heading to the 1960s from the 1950s. Hopefully we get a lot of drivers for that one. Should be exciting stuff. And I believe drivers have to take different cars for each track as well. So that should give a little bit of strategy involved. So that's the 22nd of April on a Wednesday. Then the last thing we have scheduled is the Asian Le Mans series, which is on 17th of May, which I believe the Asian Le Mans is, if I look down my list, it's the LMP3s and the GTEs for R Factor 2. So that will be on the 17th of April, so that's Sunday. So we're just getting ready to go to the grid. Not long, we've got 15 seconds or so. So 60 minutes around the French circuit of Rouen. Which drivers are going to pull away in the championship, or perhaps there's going to be a change. There is only, if I've done my maths correctly, there are 6 points between Maddie Shepherd and Gert Van Osch in the championship. So Maddie Shepherd could possibly extend her lead, but has Gert Van Osch got anything? He's a little bit down on where he has been in some of the races so far. So let's see what happens in this race. So that's Gert Van Osch sitting on the grid, waiting for the other cars to grid up. Hopefully we have no particular problems with cars getting stuck on the grid. So grid is filling up. So when the green light goes, we will be off into turn 1. So Tony Talviti with a clear view all the way to turn 1, starting on the inside of the grid. So off we go, gets a very bad start, and the Ferrari of Noix is already alongside and past. Maddie Shepherd is on the outside into turn 1. So 2 or 3 wide into turn 1. So I don't think Tony Talviti possibly got his clutch bite point correct. So Maddie Shepherd out front, Noix is in second. Pause has now dropped, has gone up to third. As they head down to the hairpin for the first time. Cold brakes, cold tyres. Let's see if everyone gets through okay. Looks like from the map there's no yellow flags. So drivers look like they have got through sufficiently. So Shepherd leads, Noix second, Pause in third. Tony Talviti from pole position now dropped down to fourth, but he's got 60 minutes to race back to the front. Green flags all round. Slightly dropping off the back of this group is Costas Kanzouris in 5th, with Van Osch in 6th. Right, up the back straight for the first time. Let's see what the draft is like. We haven't seen the draft thus far. So Julian Paws right in the draft of that Ferrari ahead. Looks like it's very effective. Tony Tauviti keeping a watching brief in the back there. So Noig's going to the inside, maybe thinking about overtaking into the braking zone. Has he got an overlap? I think he does. Matty Shepherd leaving him space. I didn't think he had enough braking ability, but this means he's going to be slightly out of shape coming up to the main straight. So Matty Shepherd ducks down right into the draft and is possibly going to overtake into turn 1. So not quite enough horsepower to get alongside up into turn 1 as we're going board with Matty Shepherd. So Gaten Noig's putting a move on the championship leader, taking points off the championship leader. Tony Tauviti having a bit of a battle with Julian Paws behind. Still not seeing any yellow flags. The field is pretty spread out from 4th onwards. So down to first gear, slightly running wide. That gives Paws an opportunity, but not quite. You could hear that Matty Shepherd was possibly a bit late on downshifts coming into the hairpin. Couldn't quite get it slowed down. Slight yellow flag for 10th place of Perotti, but I believe he's got going again. So back up front, still got Gaten Noig's still leading Matty Shepherd and Julian Paws as we're on board. Slightly wide. We're possibly going to see a Cooper of Tony Tauviti right in his rear just then. So turnabout's fair play. So Tony Tauviti has now got the draft coming up the back straight. Does he fancy an opportunity? So Julian Paws has now got to defend up until up at the end of this straight. He was able to pull out a little bit, so maybe he's a bit better around that fast right-hander. So coming down to the end of the lap, Julian Paws. Maybe Tony Tauviti thinking a big picture. Maybe he feels he can push Julian Paws into a mistake. So Paws was slightly over the dirt there. Matty Shepherd up front has not let Noig's get away as Tauviti runs a little bit wide. But if we check further back, so Gert Van Osch and Costas Kanzouris now doing battle. So this is 5th and 6th. So 5th, the Lotus 16 of Gert Van Osch and Costas Kanzouris doing battle on 5th and 6th. They are a little bit adrift from the battle for 1st to 4th, but it's still a battle nonetheless. So you can see those battles up the front there, but at the moment they're not involved. They're having a battle all of their own. Gert Van Osch trying to get it stopped. He looked like he was, and Tony Tauviti is through on Julian Paws, so it must have been a mistake coming into the hairpin, which meant that Julian Paws was slow to get away and will possibly be kicking himself. But Tony Tauviti has now got some ground to make up. So that slow start has meant he's dropped down to 3rd. He's got some time, about 2 seconds to make up on the leaders, but they are drafting together, so I don't know whether Tony Tauviti can possibly draft up to the back of them. So fastest lap of the race is our leader, Gaten Noig's 209.8. Matty Shepherd going with him right under his boot lid. But Julian Paws is not letting Tauviti get away. So here we go. So Julian Paws. No, this is for the lead. So Matty Shepherd went for the lead And he's going to come down the inside. Gaten Noig slightly wide, leaves space. Side by side coming down to this corner, but it looks like Gaten Noig's had the momentum. Maddie Shepherd would do well to possibly, I was going to say, duck in behind and let Gaten take that wider line. And Gaten unfortunately ran a little bit wide coming onto the main straight. And Maddie Shepherd, championship leader, 2:09.2, fastest lap as well, coming across the line for Maddie Shepherd. So Shepherd now leads, Noigs is in second, Talviti is in third, with Paws in fourth. That battle between 5th and 6th is raging on, but meanwhile back to 10th and 11th, an inter-team battle with Perotti and Masaryk. The two yellow Ferraris coming down to the hairpin. So 10th and 11th place. That isn't the hairpin, that is a slightly different place. It looked a lot like the entry to the hairpin, but we're on board with Noigs. Wants that first position back from Shepherd. So it was a little bit of a costly mistake running wide in the last turn. So let's see what this Ferrari and this Cooper is like on the main straight. Fabulous engine sound of this Ferrari. So slight little lift coming through that little, you see the little crest on the apex of that corner. So 0.1, it's not too much to make up on this main straight. So it looks like he's gaining all the time. This car gets slightly loose. He's possibly expecting. Maddie Shepherd goes defensive. Can Noigs actually outbrake around the outside? That was a very well done move, but that means he's late on the brakes and Maddie Shepherd can have another go. So we're alongside coming into the final turn. This is where it went all wrong last time. So Maddie Shepherd taken to the dirt a little bit to make sure they both get through okay. But Noigs, I was surprised. And further back, you can see that Paws and Talviti are right close together, side by side up the main straight. Talviti is being challenged, but holds that third place. So now Julian Paws is our fastest car on the circuit with the 2:08.8. So fantastic battles between first and second and third and fourth. Swapping all the time, and we've only done 10 minutes of racing. So Maddie Shepherd coming down to the hairpin right behind Noigs. And it looks like that Ferrari is quite slow around the hairpin, which bunches the field up. But back to the battle for 10th and 11th place. Perotti and Masaryk fighting it out between the Ferraris as they come up to the hairpin. I can hear that Lancia D50 of Phil Brown just accelerating away. Back to the battle for the lead. It's still Noigs, Shepherd, Talviti and Paws. So this group is close together. So again, does Maddie Shepherd have anything for this Ferrari up the main straight? It looks like gaining a little bit in the draft. Not running too wide, so she had to go defensive last time out because she was in the lead, but now it's the opposite way around. But it doesn't look like she has anything for that Ferrari on the brakes. We have to hope for Noigs to make a mistake. So Noigs looked like he's on the limit of braking coming into that turn. He's slightly sideways, but first and second are breaking away a little from third. So Shepherd again possibly wanting to put the scares on Noigs coming up to the first turn, perhaps wanting him to make a mistake as they come into turn 2. So down around this right-hander, up to the fast left-hander just before the hairpin. We saw before that Noix is very cautious coming up to the hairpin. You don't want to get the braking wrong coming up here. It's very easy to run wide. Oh, and we've got a spinner. It looked like Maddie Shepherd was slowed a little from Noix up front, and unfortunately Tony Talviti was right there to unfortunately knock her around. So now Noix is away. Paws is now second. Talviti is in third. Van Osch, after all that, has gone up to fourth place, with Shepherd now back down to fifth. So costly for Shepherd. Maybe feels slightly aggrieved that there wasn't a lot she could do. She was going through the turn as you do behind that Ferrari, and was just nudged in the rear. So Tony Talviti now third, and Maddie Shepherd has to make her way up back past to have hope of getting more points. So at the moment would only be on 2 points in the championship for fifth place. So huge gap back down the field to 7th place of Phil Brown. But we see Maddie Shepherd going around the outside this time. But Michael Masaryk has dropped a little bit away from Labioda, or Perotti rather, and has now got Ben Summers in for company. So Ben Summers fancies a chance around the outside. It looks like a Ferrari has missed his braking point. I think that's Perotti. So a yellow Ferrari just going up the escape road there. So Shepherd has now made her way past Van Osch and will hope to pull away. But we can see just behind Gert Van Osch is Kostas Kanzouras. Hasn't been able to make a crack into where that Lotus is. So a quarter of the way round this race, 46 minutes to go. It is Noix that leads, Paws in second, Talviti in third, Shepherd in fourth, and Van Osch in fifth. With Kostas Kanzouras still shadowing in the background. So that battle between fifth and sixth for the last points in this race. That's what's up for grabs between fifth and sixth. 2 points could become very important. So Gert Van Osch at the moment is currently second in the championship and needs all the points he can get. And Kostas Kanzouras, after his win last time out, wants to move up the order. So let's drop a bit further back to Romain Lebreau and Marius Labioda. So it's Cooper versus Ferrari. Let's see how this battle goes. 8th and 9th. So we saw from Noix that the Ferrari can gain a lot on the straight in the draft. But it looks like possibly not close enough for Labioda coming up the back straight. Although, maybe fancies a go on the brakes. He moves out quite early, but not quite enough. So Labioda playing it a little bit safe. Maybe he has something for Lebreau on the main straight. So coming through the final turn. Front straight is slightly smaller than the back straight, so possibly not enough room for our drivers to get in the draft and fancy a pass into turn one. As the Cooper of Lebreau pulls away. So back to the front. Noix is now away after all that kerfuffle with all the drivers behind getting spun. Julian Paws is in second, now seeming to pull away from Talviti behind. Shepherd has now moved up to fourth place. can see her just coming into view behind these two drivers here. So fastest driver on the circuit at the moment is Maddie Shepherd with a 2:08.4. So got some catching up to do, 45 minutes to do it. So Julian Boers coming up the back straight, trying to keep as tight as possible to that inside line. You don't want to dip a wheel on that dirt. So able to keep away from that little verge to put you out of shape, and avoiding that drain cover down at the end of the lap or the end of the straight, which can really hurt if you've got your force feedback turned up quite significantly. So Costas Kanzouris is now right with Gert Van Osch. So Gert Van Osch must have made a mistake at the end of the straight there. But is there enough of a straight on the front straight to be able to pass up to turn 1? I'm not sure there is. So not quite enough. Not quite enough, but still shadowing Gert Van Osch. He wants those points for 5th place. Now, if we have a look at who was the biggest winners and losers for the first 15 minutes of this race, it looks like Noyes, Poors and Brown were biggest winners, with gaining 2 positions off the grid. And Talviti Shepherd were the biggest losers for losing 2 positions. Gert Van Osch was very, very late into the hairpin there, and it looked like he made Costas make the same mistake. So possibly if Costas was watching the apex and not the car in front, it's a very easy thing to do, is target fixation. That means that you follow the car in front that's made an outbraking mistake, and you end up making the same mistake and following them into their accident. So Talviti right with Julian Poors for 2nd and 3rd. Maddie Shepherd getting closer in the background all the time. So 2.6 seconds. But Talviti fancies the chance. So the more that these two battle up here, the more Maddie Shepherd is going to catch. So does Poors think he needs to go defensive? Possibly does. And heads back to the racing line. So who gets the better exit? Outbrakes himself when Talviti is through. So side by side up to the final turn. Tony Talviti does not fancy going side by side in this final turn. So the gap between Talviti and Shepherd now down to 2.3 seconds. So while these two battle, it's slowing them up. But meanwhile, the leader is now 5 seconds ahead of this group. So Julian Poors and Talviti coming up to the hairpin section. So just through this right-hander and then the fast left. You can see the leader is not far away as Talviti goes wide, pushing on. It looks like that Cooper does become a bit hard to handle as the race progresses. Now that green Cooper of Maddie Shepherd is shadowing the background, gap now down to 1.6 seconds. So tighter line for Talviti coming through this left-hander. All the passes so far have been done on the straight, so through outbraking manoeuvres at the end of the straight. We've not really seen any other passes in the middle of the field. I'm seeing a yellow flag out on circuit. It looks like we may have had our first retirement. Unfortunately, it is Phil Brown, that Lancia D50. Won't be taking any further part in this race. But Tony Talviti coming to the end of the straight, outbraking Julian Pors. Can he actually get it stopped? We did see Julian Pors running a little bit wide, and Tony Talviti just keeps it on the circuit, but it looks like Julian Pors possibly didn't judge that correctly and has nudged Tony Talviti around. So it looked like Talviti may have dropped a couple of wheels on the grass. He was on the edge of braking capacity. So Julian Pors perhaps a little bit too hot into that turn. So now Maddie Shepherd is back up to third place. Julian Pors really suffering. It looks like he may have maybe heated those rear tyres, because it looks like he's suffering. You can see that he's wiggling about. That car does not look stable at all, so I'm wondering what's happened. So it looks like he's struggling with the brakes. So maybe overheating brakes, perhaps. So Matty Shepherd has the pace, putting in the fastest lap of the race so far. So you see he's really struggling with front grip coming into some of these turns. I wonder whether he was just pushing a little too hard and leaning on those fronts. So Matty Shepherd back up to second place. But the lead is up to 8.3 seconds, so that's a big portion of lap time to find. But still, we're coming down to half distance. So through all of this, Shepherd now back up to second place. I wonder whether Julian Pors has perhaps gone aggressive on setup, and the car is becoming a little bit different to handle once the fuel load comes out. But it did look like he was struggling to get it slowed down, at particularly the hairpin and particularly this corner as well. So it looks okay at that point. So panic over. We are now back to racing for second and third. So it looks like perhaps what was a worrying Julian Pors is now car looks a little more settled. But again, once these two battle, that gap for the lead will just be getting larger. So we're going to step back to the battle between Talviti. Now after that little accident, Talviti has been knocked back to where Gert van Osch is. Gert van Osch is in sixth, so through all of this, Kanzouris is now up to fourth. So Talviti must have dropped back into this battle between fifth and sixth and maybe disrupted it and swapped the positions around. So Talviti with now a Lotus in for company, chasing. So looks like Gert van Osch was really struggling to get that power down coming out of the hairpin. A lot of people seem to be struggling as the race goes on. The handling of these cars seem to change quite dramatically. So I'm looking back at some of the other positions. We do have Labioda, as I unfortunately cut to Labioda. He has spun around. I was going to say he was not too far away from Masaryk, but unfortunately that has changed. So possibly a mistake going into the hairpin has let Masaryk get away. So Labioda in the other Ferrari, not far behind. So Pors now back at the front. It looks like Maddie Shepherd may be putting out a little bit of a gap. The gap is under 0.8 of a second, so possibly out of draft range. So head down and trying to get those lap times up again to possibly get that lead down. So the lead has come down a little, but not an awful lot. 7.7 seconds, down to about 7.5 seconds. Julian Paws looks like he's got his wheels in line. Although that slight wiggle is back, so I don't know whether he's suffering on corner entry. But Tony Dalviti has got Costas Kanzouras. In fact, Tony Dalviti looks like he's past Costas Kanzouras. So we missed that on screen. So it's Cooper with Lotus 16 just behind. Slight yellow flag for Perotti, but it looks like he's got going again. Back in 10th place. So Talviti, Costas Kanzouras, and then the Lotus of Gert van Osch just behind. So this gaggle of cars having a right old ding dong. It is one of the closest battles on track at the moment. Plus second and third are not too far away from each other, but the gap between second and third has gone up to 1.4 seconds. So stretching that gap out even more, but the gap for the lead, I'm seeing the leaders' lap times putting in 2:09s, but Maddie Shepherd put in a 2:08 last time around, so this isn't settled. We're nearly at half distance. So 28 minutes gone, 32 minutes to go. What has the rest of the race got in store? We have noticed that a few of the races have gone this way. They've started out with a flurry of activity, and as the race has progressed, it settles down a bit, but there's been a lot of races where there's always been a sting in the tail right at the end, either with battles or with incidents. So we'll have to see whether this is going to be the same thing. So will there be fireworks at the end of this race? We'll have to see. So Noig still leads with Shepherd in second and Julian Paws, company on screen, in third. So this will do wonders for Shepherd's championship, along with Julian Paws' championship as well. So Julian Paws currently in fourth in the championship. Not far off third of Talviti in points. So still struggling with that hairpin a little. It does seem that these cars do not like too much overheating of the tyres, otherwise they become a little bit difficult to handle. So if we drop back to fourth place, so Tony Talviti looks like he's possibly pulling a little bit of a gap to Costas Kanzouras. Is now 1.5 seconds. So Costas, we're now back to where we were. So Costas just in front of Gert van Osch. So Gert van Osch is probably ruining the day that he was up in fourth a minute ago and he's now back down to sixth. So, and these are the last points paying positions. So it only goes down to fifth place in this championship. 8 for a win, 6 for second, 4 for third, and then 3 and a 2. So back down the back straight. So further down we now have Romain Lebreau, who's now on his own. Masaryk has now dropped away by 6.7 seconds in the Ferrari. So it looks like all the Ferraris of Masaryk, Labioda and Perotti are all grouped together near the back of the field. So this circuit in France is proving tough for the Ferraris. And we have Perotti at the back, having to learn this car. This is his first race in this series this season. So having to learn the ins and outs of what this Ferrari can and can't do. And then we have the Cooper of Ben Summers. We did see Ben Summers struggling last time out with a very ill handling Cooper for much of this race, but or much of last race. But all the wheels are on his wagon this time. but he's got a little bit of catching up to do out the back of the field. So back to the battle between Talviti and Costas Kanzouras. The gap is kind of stabilising around 1.5 to 1.7 seconds-ish. Gert Van Osch has now dropped off the back of this lot. That may be looking at lap times, 2:09. There was possibly a mistake on this lap, which has dropped Gert Van Osch off the back, which would mean no championship points, but there's still a long way to go in this race. 28 minutes to go. Still plenty of time for things to happen, and they normally do. So as I say, this track has been in sim racing for quite a number of years. As we see our leader now in the lead by about just over 6 seconds. So that lead is coming down gently, slowly but surely. But as I say, this track has been in sim racing for a number of years, and I would say like 26 years in some form or another. So no matter what sim you've been driving, if you've been driving in Grand Prix Legends, perhaps R Factor 1 or 2, you may have driven a version of this circuit. So it does have another layout. I don't know whether we will see where the cut through is, but as we're coming up to the back straight, there is a cut through section, which is, I believe, is the newer layout that was used. It cuts out the entire back straight, and you end up going through a quite fiddly left and right section, and then comes out just after where the last turn is. But I feel that this layout of the circuit has a bit more of a flow to it. I'm seeing, unfortunately, that Gert Van Osch gone around out the hairpin. Didn't quite catch his accident, but the yellow flag at the hairpin. Is that Costas Kanzouras? Yeah, it is indeed. Costas Kanzouras is through on Talviti. Unfortunately, the cameraman missed that. So was that a mistake from Talviti last time out? It may have been on this lap. So these Coopers are well matched. It'd be good to have a spec series of a car like this, a low-powered 1950s car. So we are going to be doing a new series at Sim Racing Online, which is the 1967 series, which, if you're familiar with Grand Prix Legends, again, that is the series that's used with Grand Prix Legends. And it looks like Perotti in 10th may be close to being overtaken. I saw a yellow flag again at the hairpin. The hairpin seems to be causing a lot of problems for these drivers, as Badia Shepherd puts the fastest lap of the race in a 2:07.7. So it does seem to be providing a little bit of a difficulty for these drivers, because you have to brake and turn at the same time. Costas goes wide and Talviti is back through. I was just going to say that 4th and 5th were together, but it looks like Talviti is through. Was that Costas just running a little bit wide in turn 1? He seemed to lose a lot of speed and momentum. And now you can see Tony Talviti pulling it a little bit away. Talviti goes wide at the hairpin, again causing lots and lots of problems. The added thing at the hairpin is you've got that cobbled section at the apex, which doesn't have a lot of grip, so causing a few problems for these drivers. Now that Maxime Perotti has made a little bit of a mistake, I thought he had just gathered it up, and that led to Ben Summers having to take avoiding action. He was very, very lucky that there was some runoff there Also very lucky that those banners were not solid, so Perotti getting a little bit of a wiggle on what looked like coming into and out of the one of the final turns, which has led to Ben Summers coming up to 10th place. Perotti maybe fancies a go up the inside. He does not. Ben Summers, unfortunately, goes a little bit wide, but gathers it up. So that yellow nose of the Ferrari doesn't take much for to poke its nose up the inside. Unfortunately, the hairpin is not a good place to pass. He can't quite slow it down. I feel like he was on the brakes consistently there, but he couldn't quite get that thing slowed down for the hairpin. So again, the hairpin takes another victim. And Ben Summers is able to stay ahead. So Labioda out on his own there with Tony Giaviti now solidly in 4th. Looks like he's dropped Costas Kanzouras behind, but I am keeping an eye on that gap for the lead. The gap for the lead has come down to 4 seconds with only 22 minutes to go. So could we have a showdown near the end? Maddie Shepherd putting in 2:07.6 was the fastest lap time, and which is the second faster than our leader, Gaten Noig. So you can see that green Cooper in the background is getting closer and closer. So in action early on, Julian Paws is now out on his own. He can't see anyone ahead and anyone behind, but we'll have to see whether he comes into play a little bit later on. So Perotti has been having trouble slowing it down at this turn specifically. The Ferrari seems to get a little bit out of shape, and then you've got to be very careful stepping on the loud pedal coming out and getting as much momentum as you can onto this main straight. Running slightly wide coming out of the final turn, but no harm done. There is a drain cover, you can see it's just gone past, so hitting that as well does give you a little bit of a shock if you're not expecting it. So the lead now down to 3.5 seconds between Noigs and Shepherd. This is the closest battle on track at the moment. Ben Summers and Perotti near the back of the field. Now what I did say, remember, it doesn't matter where it is in the field, there are battles all the way down and all the way through. So Labioda out on his own. Looks like he's having trouble getting the power down in that Ferrari. Once you get those tyres spinning up, these cars don't seem to have a lot of slip angle. They can bite quite significantly. So Maddie Shepherd out of the hairpin. Can see the quarry ahead. That is the red Ferrari of Noigs. So after overtaking early on, Noigs pretty much pulled out a little bit of a gap and just let everybody else fight amongst themselves, and it looks like with 20 minutes to go, our leaders are going to come across their first lapped car. But Lebro has now got Masaryk in for company, coming up to the right and then the left until the hairpin. So Masaryk has caught Lebro in these last few laps. Looks like Lebro, from the lap time I'm seeing, the last lap time 2:14, so possibly a little bit of a mistake. So Masaryk being able to slow this Ferrari down into this hairpin. No particular dramas like we've seen before. So there is a yellow flag out somewhere. It looks like Perotti again, having a few problems with that Ferrari, having to learn on the road in this first round for him in this series. But continuing on, Masaryk is shadowing Lebro is in a Cooper ahead of him. But we've seen that the Ferrari and the Cooper are quite well matched. But I'm looking at the timesheets again. Nearly a fast lap of the race is Maddie Shepherd. 2:08.0, still 0.9 of a second behind the leader. As we see the lap cars becoming involved, that is Ben Summers just ahead of Maddie Shepherd. So Ben Summers having trouble just slowing it down there. That is the 4th place I'm seeing on my list. It looks like Tony's had another accident. Tony is on his side there. That is very unusual. I've never seen that before. So there must have been an accident where, as he got it going again, it looks like he's possibly overheated the engine. He has. So that will be our 2nd retirement. So that's going to lead to a change in the championship points quite significantly. So it looks like in the frustration of being on 2 wheels, revving of the engine overheated it, and he is our 2nd retirement of the day. So Masaryk still following Lebro in that Cooper. So Lebro keeping it tidy out of the hairpin. Slight oversteer moment for Masaryk. These drivers and cars seem very well matched. Last lap times are in the 2:11 range, so slightly lagging behind the leaders, but still well matched between each other. So Tony Tauviti will not score this round. So all for naught, as they say. So this means that puts Costas Kanzeris up to 4th. Gert Van Osch back into the points in 5th. So much needed championship points for Van Osch, as Masaryk is able to close up in the draft against that Cooper of Lebro in front. I don't think he's close enough to make a move unless he's really daring on the brakes. So he's very, very close. He's pulling out. He's possibly going to have a little bit of a go. He's later on the brakes than Lebro. That's a very good move, but doesn't quite get it done. Looks like in the last phase of braking, locked up a little and has got to do it all again. I didn't think he actually had the braking to get up the inside at that last turn, but he did indeed. So slight moment for Costas Kanzeris. Oh, he's having an awful lot of trouble spinning up at that corner I've never seen before. So I wonder whether Costas is having some setup issues. That car becoming a bit hard to handle late on in the race as the fuel load comes down, and the lighter it gets becomes a little bit of a different handling to manage. And Van Osch is not far away to take advantage. Again, the battle for Lebro and Masaryk battles on, but the battle for the lead, which is maybe a bit more important at the moment. Maddie Shepherd has caught up to Noigs with just under 15 minutes to go. So now it's just them two rather than 3rd and 4th getting involved. So Maddie Shepherd, another fastest lap of the race at 2:07.4. So she's putting in the laps. She has a pace advantage, but where is she going to pass this Ferrari? Where does that Cooper have an advantage? So she's got to pick her place. So coming up to the slow hairpin, which has been very difficult to slow some of these cars down. Keeping the wheels in line on exit, trying to get as good momentum as possible. So she just needs to keep it between under a second coming through this section here, and she'll be in a draft coming up the back straight, and we'll possibly see a move up the inside. So I don't know which driver that was that was hitting the dirt there, but now the Ferrari is a little bit under pressure. So Noix has had it his own way for about 45 minutes, but now feeling the need to go defensive. But back to the battle for Masaryk and Lebreau. It's really tightened up. Coming down to the hairpin section. I am keeping an eye on the battle for the lead as it's coming down the back straight. Maddie Shepherd did get in the draft as I suspected and is able to pull alongside and get it slowed down. So we've seen some oversteer moments coming on exit. So can she get momentum? Stops it on the apex. No possibility to pass there. So puts the car in the middle of the road. So is there enough momentum for this Ferrari to pass? Up to turn 1. Again, Maddie Shepherd putting her car right where she needs it to be. Slightly defensive move. But battle on with 12 minutes to go for the lead. I did say there might be a sting in the tail. Maddie Shepherd has had to work her way back from that accident early on, spun her around and is back to the lead. So does Noix have anything for the Cooper of Maddie Shepherd? So Maddie Shepherd getting it all wrong. So this hairpin is proving very difficult for these drivers. So not only getting the car slowed down, but just getting out of the hairpin is difficult, because you want to get on the throttle as quick as possible, but those cobblestones aren't very grippy, and if you're not very careful you can spin it around. So Noix didn't really have any opportunity, or didn't have any choice but to give Maddie Shepherd a little bit of a nudge there as she came out of the hairpin that time, because pretty much Shepherd's car ground to a halt on the apex. So Lebreau and Masaryk for 6th and 7th. This may not be for points, but the battle still rages on. That's what it's all about. So coming up to what is the hairpin section, which have proved very, very difficult, getting the car slowed down. And on the exit, so they keep their wheels in line. I am keeping an eye on that battle for the lead as we switch over to it through the final corner. So Noix in the draft, maybe sizing up for a move or having to think about where he's going to need to pass coming onto the final lap. He will need to get the move done before the last lap if he's going to stay in front. So I did see a few messages in chat about possible engine overheating as well. So maybe these drivers have got to bear in mind that if they're running in the draft of some of these drivers and redlining it too much. So I'm hearing that Ferrari is revving a lot on downshifts. So could that do bad things for the engine temperatures? So slight wiggle coming out of the hairpin for Noix, which allows Shepherd to breathe for a second. So the gap now up to 0.6 of a second. It's not an awful lot, which probably can be gained back in the draft, but again, maybe Noix has got to think about where do I want to be positioned on the last lap? Do I want to be in front or behind? So now Maddie Shepherd has got a little bit of clear air and a little bit of breathing space behind. Masaryk is now shadowing Romain Lebreau. got to think of a different place to pass. We've seen all of the passes on the back straight so far, but Masaryk looks like he's looking for any way, anywhere on this circuit to pass. I'm seeing that Perotti may have gone around in 9th place and has now dropped to 10th. That is Masaryk getting it all wrong coming up to the hairpin. So instead of going right, his car went left. So that means it's unfortunately undone all of his hard work. Back to the leaders. Maddie Shepherd still leads. Noyes shadowing in seconds. So the gap was about 0.7 as they crossed the line. Lap times back up to the 207s, 208 range. So can Shepherd hold off Noyes for the remainder of this race? Just under 8 minutes to go. So we did see that Shepherd did have a little bit of a pace advantage of about a second a lap. I don't know whether Noyes was possibly pacing himself to the end. And now he's got past for the lead. He's upped his pace a little. So we've just under 7.5 minutes to go. Shepherd leads, Noyes second, Paws in third, Kansuris in fourth, and Gert van Osch in fifth. Those are the points paying positions. So the lead now up to 1.2 seconds. So is Noyes perhaps cooling down for another last section of this race to do battle? As Maddie Shepherd is now out in front. It's been an up and down race, this. Battles early on. A couple of collisions and a couple of spins. We saw Tony Daviti unfortunately on 2 wheels earlier and perhaps blowing his engine. So championship leader Maddie Shepherd doing what she needs to do in these final 2 rounds, maybe putting it out of reach of the cars behind. But again, we've still yet to hear from the admins whether there will be a dropped round or an extra round after round 6 at Zandvoort. But we should hear about that next week to see if it's going to be a championship decider, or perhaps drivers will be dropping their worst rounds. Although that won't make a lot of difference to a lot of people because the points are very, very scarce. So Shepherd still leads, driving like there's only 1 more round to go, and maybe got to see it that way. Zandvoort is going to be very different to where we are today. There's a lot of flat out corners, but there's a lot more elevation change. So after that little accident, Masaryk has dropped back from Lebro and he's got to do all that work again to catch up. 1.6 seconds to catch in just under 5 minutes. It's doable. So across the line for another lap. I have to look at my see if I can find my UI so I can see how many laps we've got left. We should have just over 2 laps to go. So Masaryk has now closed right up on the back of Lebro. So has a pace advantage, but it does seem that you need a little more than that to be able to pass. So, battle resumed with only just under 4 minutes to go. Could there still be changes yet? Again, this isn't for points, but that doesn't make no difference to these drivers. Lebro is slightly slow through that left-hander. This gives Masaryk an opportunity to get in the draft up this back straight. He's closer than he ever has been before the back straight. And we know that this Ferrari does gain a lot on the Cooper in the draft. I'm just seeing a yellow flag from Noigs. It looks like he had a little bit of an accident at the hairpin, which means he is now dropped just under 6 seconds behind. So is the battle for the lead over and done with? So maybe pushing a little bit too hard into the hairpin, as we've seen a lot this race. Masaryk trying his best to get him on the brakes. Lebro trying to stay as close as possible, giving each other racing room, which I love to see. Masaryk was able to make his way by, but can he stay there? Lebro probably has something for him on this front straight. He's right under the rear. Masaryk deciding to go centre of the track to perhaps defend from a move going up turn 1. So the tables now have turned. Lebro has now got to try and catch Masaryk. So a fantastic battle between these two. Very, very fair. So coming up to the hairpin for penultimate time, I believe. So Masaryk going slightly tighter there. I think he couldn't quite get it on the line that he wanted coming into the hairpin. But coming out the hairpin on the racing line and getting the power down as quick as possible. So Masaryk now up to 6th place and Lebro down to 7th. But it doesn't look like this battle is over and done with. The leader is just coming up to the hairpin for what is the final time, I think. Part way through the lap. But this is still the battle between Lebro and Masaryk. And I think I may have just cursed Lebro there. That Cooper does sometimes seem that the front end can wash away. Snap of oversteer, and unfortunately that means the battle might be all for naught. So if we go back to the leader with 37 seconds to go. We're going to come up the back straight. I believe this is going to be the final lap, because we haven't even got to the 3rd sector yet. So this will be Maddie Shepherd's 3rd win of the season, making up for that round at Napoli, where unfortunately she couldn't take part due to a game error. The clock has nearly run down with 5 seconds left, just keeping controlled out of that right-hander. The clock has run down. So through the final turn, Maddie Shepherd will come. Slight bit of oversteer, but nothing to worry about. A well-fought win. She had the pace to overhaul these other drivers where others made mistake, but a good first round for Gaten Noigs, who comes across the line in his Ferrari in 2nd. Julian Paws in 3rd, just coming up the short straight into the final corner. So battles early on for Julian Paws. They will come across the line in 4th, so good points for Julian Paws. Kostas Kanzouras battles with Gert Van Osch early on, and he will come home in 4th, and he does capitalise on other people's errors. So getting some good points for the championship. So 4th place for Kostas Kanzouras and Gert Van Osch Maybe a couple of mistakes, probably kicking himself, but still coming back with the final championship points in 5th. Masaryk and Lebro battling down to the final. It looks like possibly Lebro may have got on the outside of that turn, and there is once you get on the outside of that turn, there's no going back. So Masaryk is going to come home in 7th. Lebro is going to be, in fact 6th rather, as Perotti comes over the line in 10th, a lap down. So Masaryk and Lebro finish not far from each other. So a great finish from those two. They've been putting on a good show in these final laps. So good finish from Masaryk and Lebro in the end. It looks like we have come to the end of... Doesn't look like any more runners are yet to come over the line. So how about that for a finish, and for a, in this case, a French Grand Prix. So let's have a look at what was the finishing order. So session results from the race are as follows. So Maddie Shepherd came away with the win. Gaten Noig's first round with us in this 1950s championship comes home in 2nd. Julian Bors, well battled, up to 3rd. Kostas Kanzouras in 4th. And Gert van Osch getting the last of the points in 5th. But Michael Masaryk in 6th, but closely followed by Romain Lebro in 7th. 8th will be Labioda. And 9th will be Ben Summers. And then you had Maxime Perotti. I'm just looking down the list. It's his first time with us as well, so I'm going to have to put him on the championship board. So Maxime Perotti, first finish is 10th, but DNFs unfortunately this round will be Phil Brown and unfortunately Tony Talviti. So Tony Talviti currently well down in the championship order at the moment. Will come home in 11th place. Phil Brown will come home in 12th. So, what does this look like for our championship? I am very interested to find out. So I'm going to export the points, and hopefully if I've done everything correctly, we will have our championship points up on screen. But if we look at the schedule, so we've got supposedly one final round to come, which is the beaches of Zandvoort. So the 1960s version of Zandvoort. That should be fun. But let's have a look at championship standings. If I've done them correctly, round 5 should be filled in. Indeed they are. Maddie Shepherd has now increased her lead to 30 points. So is it out of reach? Because there's 8 points for a win. So if we're going to have 2 more rounds, then it's not out of reach. But if we're going to have 1 more round, then that may be the championship over, because she leads by 12 points. Gert van Osch, consistent finishes now, is now up to 2nd with 18 points. Julian Bors dropped a little in some of those finishes, but is now around 15. So you can see 3, 4, 4, 4. So consistency, but still not quite got onto the top steps of that podium. And then we have Kostas Kanzouras now in 4th, level on points with Tony Talviti in 5th. Then we have our little gap. So even though Gaten Noig has only been here for 1 round, he's straight up to 6th place in the championship with the 6 points for 2nd place. Michael Masaryk in 7th, but no points today, but still well battled. 8th is Marius Labioda. Romain Lebro with just 3 points in 9th, and Jim Cavallo, who wasn't here today is in joint 9th place. So, what more to come? What more to come in this championship? I did say there will be a sting in the tail. This championship has tended to go that way. These drivers put on a show. They tend to leave it all to the last minute and put a battle on and a show on. So join us next time out, where we will be at Zandvoort, and it's April the 9th at the same kind of time, about 7:45 UK time, which is GMT +1. So if you fancy joining us, head to simracingonline.co.uk and you can join us on track. But if you have been watching, thank you very much, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.